got your questions now. The only other thing I'm gonna ask is, when I announce them, I just need you guys to be as loud as possible. Is that cool? Yeah. All right, so here we go. Up first, let's bring out the wonderful Barbara Crampton! I'm incredible. I'm so excited to get to talk all things Re-Animator with you guys. I first want to ask, how often do you guys have the opportunity to actually, meet up and see each other at conventions?
Well, this year is a little bit intense because it's the 40th anniversary of Re-Animator, so we've been seeing more of each other this year than we have.
More than we may care to.
That's not true. He's just cynic, and we love each other. That's the great thing. We had a great experience together, and here we still are.
Like you said, 40 years in this movie, I mean, it is so incredible. Clearly a cult favorite and stood the test of time. But I want to know, was there a moment for you on set where you looked around and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so insane, but it is totally going to work?
Anybody? Well, I will say that I hadn't done a lot of film work in front of a camera, so I didn't really have a frame of reference. But I do have a distinct memory of shooting the cat scene, and Matt Hallberg, our incredible DP, was at his camera, and I was standing next to him, just kind of trying to get through osmosis some knowledge, and he was looking through the lens and kind of framing, and he pulled his eye away, and he said, he was Swedish, so he said, I think this movie would be pretty good. And I went, really? And he goes, yes. He knew what he was talking about.
I think the funny thing is that, for all of us, it was one of our first movies, and we were just lucky to have a job. That's what we thought. And we all liked the script, and we had fun on the movie, and Stuart would keep us a long time on the set. A typical day is like 10 to 12 hours on a movie set, and we worked 14, 15, 16-hour days because he wouldn't stop filming. He kept going and going and going. I mean, it was an incredible experience, and it was kind of crazy. I do remember being on the set for one of the last shots in the movie where I'm going down the hallway and the zombie gets me and he starts to attack me and strangle me, and then Bruce pulls, for whatever reason, I think Stuart just wanted him to do this. He reaches into his eyeball and pulls out his eye. Was his eye really a threat? Or Stuart just wanted, he got a cow eye, right? And he just wanted Bruce to grab the cow eye and hold the cow eye. And I had a girlfriend visiting me on the set. It was your friend, Licia Naff, and she was there. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when we were doing that scene, and she said to me, Barbara, I'm really scared. What is going on? This movie's frightening to me. And can I stay over at your house, or will you come over my house tonight? Because I don't want to go home alone. And I was like, what? It's just special effects. But the cow eye, I don't know, stood out to me as being wow, this is what is that?
My idea of when I started to feel this is really working was, I don't know if we asked, I seem to remember we asked if we could see dailies, and probably a week into it we started to see dailies, and just going without music, without any sort of editing, without anything, just the rawness of it, started to see that really worked, surprisingly theatrical and cathartic and all sorts of things. You went like, huh, I didn't really see it turning into this. But also in the doing of it, every now and then you just hear musicality, you just hear the rhythm, the people you're working with, you hear their music, you feel part of the same score. Like the rhythm is yours, the rhythm is theirs, but you're singing the same song. And very much that happened a lot. We're like, huh, that really worked. Like if that was a scene in class, you wasted. So that's my recollection.
Well, I think one of the keys to the success of the movie is Stewart's insistence that we rehearse, which is really unusual. They don't give a lot of time on sets to rehearse. It's let's block it and shoot it. And the actors scramble in their trailer, like let's get together and run the lines. But Stewart, for 2 or 3 weeks, we would get together and we would run the scenes, block the scenes. So we had a very short shooting schedule. So when we came on set and we're doing this scene, we'd go, got it, we're ready. Which is invaluable, because when you do theater, you spend 4 weeks rehearsing. When you do film, yeah, not so much. They don't want to pay for. Why would we pay for getting ready, right? So it's a wrong dynamic, but it's the way that it is. But so he just knew, coming from the theater, he knew, be prepared, and then when it's time, you are ready, and we kind of were. Right?
Richard, I wanted to ask, because obviously, like, the music is such a big part of this film as well. So, how much footage did you have while they were actually like making the movie, like, and while you were composing? Like, were there any scenes that you had to do before you saw a final cut?
I see. Well, in this case, no. I mean, there have been cases where I've done pre-scoring, like when I did Troll, there was a whole song, and so I did that way before the actual filming, because they needed certain things for the filming. But in this case, this wasn't the case with Re-Animator. I remember distinctly the very first time that I saw anything, it was just Stewart and I in a screening room, and this was a first cut, so you have to understand first cuts are usually notoriously long, but this was beyond notoriously long. I think the first cut was something like
2.5
a little over 2.5
Everything
hours.
that Stewart.
Exactly. It was crazy. So Stewart, I noticed that he kept looking over to me while we were looking at this first cut, and I wish he were alive, because he could tell the story better than I. But he would look over, and then he would see me, really concentrating, and then I would close my eyes, and then he'd look over, and he thought I was in deep thought and all this. The reality is that this thing was so fucking long. It just put me to sleep. So he never let me live that down. But eventually, when it got to its proper
86 minutes.
Yeah,
with billing.
With billing, right. So it's roughly almost 90 minutes. Then it was a whole other film. But in the case of Re-Animator, I really after that first long cut, that's when I actually started thinking about what this needed and discussing it with Stewart, and that's when the juices started really flowing. But even with that long, I mean, I could see the dynamics that were called for in this film, and it became a lot clearer over the following several weeks when they were doing the final editing and all that. But that's kind of was the dynamic at that point.
And what was it like for all of y'all to see the final cut of the film for the first time with the music in place and everything?
Well, the first time I saw it, it was on Hollywood Boulevard in the theater.
You didn't go to the cast and crew screening?
I don't remember. It doesn't
Was
have
it at the directors, the theater in Beverly Hills on a Monday night? I remember.
Wow. Okay. For whatever reason, I don't remember that. I think it was because I was with an audience at the theater, and I went with a friend, and I sat in the back of the theater, and everybody was like really responding to the film in a very vocal way. And I remember being stunned at that screening. I just don't remember the first one. Maybe we were all together, but for some reason that didn't have like as much of an effect on me as it was with an audience.
Right. I think the first time I saw it, and I don't know if it was, I think the first time I saw it was Stuart screened it kind of over by the Desilu Productions in a screening room for like the sci-fi fantasy club of Forrest Ackerman and all of that. They, you know, he wanted to get their take on it. Yeah, Radford, but it was in Hollywood. Yeah, not there's Radford over in the valley, but
Radford near Paramount.
yeah, it was down there. The thing I most remember about that was David Gale's wife was not happy.
I wonder why.
I feel bad for David.
A few people got that.
Yeah. So, well, I wish
But
David
he was
Gale
so
were here.
nice,
He
David
was such
Gale.
a sweet man and perfect for that role. He was perfect enemy for everybody.
Well, that face of his
Oh,
was incredible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone said he was the prototype for Dudley Do-Right. You know the cartoon? The guy who drew that knew David and liked it. I don't know if that's
I didn't
true.
know that. That's cool.
Yeah.
We'll take it as fact. I like that. So I was going to say, this film obviously asks like the timeless question: just because we can, should we do something? So I want to know, where do you think all of your characters land morally?
Oh my God, Jeff and I were having this conversation just yesterday, weren't we, Jeff?
Yes, you called me like the bad guy of the movie. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I saved you from an awful thing.
Of course you would think that about yourself.
Well, I redeemed myself. I stopped him from doing that. So maybe it gave me a little bit of cred for that. Maybe not.
If you hadn't come along, Meg and Dan would have gotten married and lived happily ever after.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have seen the movie.
And if Dr. Hill hadn't been a plagiarist, then I wouldn't have had a problem with him.
But does any bad guy really think they're a bad guy? When we play characters, they always
I
tell
never
us that
play a bad.
you
You can't
never
play
you never
bad.
play that you're bad.
You-
There's always a reason for what you're
You
doing.
have a justification for what
So you're having a justification even now. Just saying.
Well, the work is the only thing that's important, right?
What do you think?
I don't attach that word to this movie. There's no, it's over before you start, and I don't know. I never think about any role or any movie kind of like that. It's a piece of art that you're trying to make, and I'll leave that to the ratings board.
I think any character and any person in life, we're all doing the best we can, and at the end of your life, or as you get older, you look back and you think, oh, I could have done better with that, or I could have done better with that, and we're all trying to get by. We're all trying to do the best we can, and with what we have right now. So I feel like, I think your character Bruce was the hero of the film, and you tried to do the best you can with what the circumstances were. So I give you a pass on what happened.
It is sort of the movie is sort of a metaphor of a lovely couple. They have their life ahead of them. Everything looks bright. And then temptation shows up. I tempt him to pursue something that takes him down a destructive path. But Dr. Hill has his own awful agenda, and there's just dark forces that are around you, and it just derails your life plan.
Sure.
It's kind of a tragedy, they would have lived happily ever after. He would have been a successful doctor. They would have had a lovely home and children. And I show up.
But you know what? It's if you think about it, all those ingredients, just the way you just described it now. If you didn't know this film, you go, "Oh, geez, I don't want to see this. This is terrible. What a terrible, sad
What a
story.
downer."
Yeah, what a downer." But that was the real trick with Re-Animators: how to make that into something that the audience would respond to, and not get totally grossed out or down or whatever. And that's kind of the end result is kind of the genius behind Re-Animator. This was, especially for the time, was something that a lot of people, they were vomiting, they didn't want anything, it sounded all horrible, but it was made acceptable.
And it had heart.
Through
It had heart.
It had a certain amount of humor. It was, the audience was given permission to enjoy the gore and not take it seriously, and that's, I think, a big ingredient of why it's lasted 40